You've developed a strong desire. Huh? Is that good? That's good.
You.
No, you.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I was asking you this morning.
But if you were going to read it, I would have rather heard it from you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm trying to actually decide what to. Jai Saparikar, Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiyo Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Chakra Jiyo Ki Jai, Jai Shri Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai, Jai Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai, Jai Shri Nisringa Bhagavan Ki Jai, Jai Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jai Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Jai Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Jai Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Jai Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Mahabhagavat Srila Gaur Kishore Das Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Srila Sachidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai, Vaishnav Sarvabhaum Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai, Jai Shri Gaudiya Vedanta Charya Baladev Vidyabhusan Prabhu Ki Jai, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai, Srila Narottam Srinivas Shyamananda Prabhu Trai Ki Jai, Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Sada Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Srila Sarup Damodar Roy Ramanandari Gaura Parsada Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhan Dvadashavanatmaka Shri Braj Mandala Dham Ki Jai, Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Yamuna Ganga Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Radha Gopinath Radha Madan Mohan Jiyo Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Radha Shyama Sundar Radha Raman Radha Damodar Jiyo Ki Jai, Jai Shrimati Lalita Vishaka Adi Ashta Sakhi Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Manjari Rati Manjari Adi Manjari Vrinda Ki Jai, Shrimati Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Shrimati Purnamasa Yogamaya Devi Ki Jai, Shri Gopi Swar Mahadeva Ki Jai, Sarva Bhishta Pradata Giriraj Govardhana Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Grantaraj Shri Chaitanya Charitamritam Ki Jai, Grantaraj Shri Chaitanya Bhagavat Ki Jai, Jai Shri Vishva Vaishnava Raj Sabha Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Tribhuvana Pavana Harinam Samkirtana Ki Jai, Tribhuvana Mangala Harinama Prabhu Ki Jai, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra Ki Jai, Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Chishe Nama He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Brindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. Then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And then I'm offering my Dandavat Pranams to all of my Shri Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga. And my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and all the Vaishnavis. So, not quite sure what to what to choose. The day after tomorrow, on Monday, is the appearance day of our beloved Param Gurudev Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj. So that's a major festival Katha. And then the 2 days after that, on Wednesday, is the appearance day? Yeah, the appearance day of Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So much Katha is there, especially his Katha, his articles, and it's amazing. So that will be a very big block of major, So, just trying to think, because today is Saturday, right? Yeah, so today and tomorrow. And I was considering, before I was thinking about continuing to do Nityananda Katha on the 5th chapter, which I haven't opened it up at all, although the devotees have read themselves who are coming in the morning class. They've read that, but you know, I haven't. I've read it myself, but speaking in class is a whole other thing, and comes to life, you know. So I was kind of thinking of that. Braj Prabhu gave me Chaitanya Bhagavat this morning with a couple of chapters there on Lord Nityananda. That includes that. And that had also been something that I was thinking of. Thing is that all these topics will take a long time to go through. Like the 5th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita is very power-packed with Siddhanta. You've been there in morning class. Yes? Yes. So, I even have other ideas. I was thinking prarthana, to go through prarthana and actually read that, the songs that have been composed, the whole process. I was kind of really thinking to do that. You said that you have both books, right?
Yeah. Well, one book is put out by Radha Kunj, that's the Prem Bhakti.
Oh, that one. Oh.
And I also have Partana by
Yeah.
Bhumika.
Right.
Mentioned Bhajan Rahasya too.
I've mentioned Bhajan Rahasya. I've also thought about it within the last few days.
Das Molataki?
Yeah, I've also thought about that. That was like a couple of months ago. I was going to go through that in the Jaiva Dharma. You know, so there's so much. The other thing is that in literally practically 1 month from now is the biggest festival in the universe. The appearance day of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaur Tattva, Gaur Katha, Navadvip Parikrama Katha. That's what I'll be doing for 9 days before that. So that's on the 28th of March. So practically from the 19th or so, I'll start, because I want to give at least 1 day for each one of the 9 islands. And I'll read through the Navadvip Mahatmya, and pretty sure I have it. The Navadvip Bhavataranga.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, Navadvip Bhavataranga was published by ISKCON with the Navadvip Mahatmya. It's straight translation, still very good. Oh, this is always the problem.
It's overwhelming.
Huh?
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why Srila Prabhupada used the exact word that you just spoke. You know where he used it? In the very, very beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In one of the first chapters, I think it's the 2nd chapter of the first canto. I think it's, and that's another topic that I wanted to cover. I wanted to actually go through that whole 2nd chapter of the first canto. That is so important. Yeah. And read the purports of Srila Prabhupada and discuss. But Prabhupada says there, in those purports, somewhere, I'll have to find it, that the student of the absolute truth, that's what we're trying to become, right? Students of the absolute truth. Are we trying to become? Yes. So the student of the absolute truth is always overwhelmed with the task of researching the truth. Oh, let me not forget to mention, golden volcano of divine love. What I read through on that couple of days, 2-3 days, we went through that chapter about Lord Nityananda. But now that I've gotten a taste for that and looked at the rest of the book, oh, I want to read that again.
I have it.
That's a good one. Actually, now that I think of it, with Gaur Purnima coming up, that would actually be ideal to start reading that, because it's actually Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote in Sanskrit an epic poem called Prema Dhamma Deva Stotram, 72 verses. Epic Sanskrit composition, like on the level of any of our acharyas, you know. And it's all telling in 72 verses the life and the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This book is taken from his informal talks, but on that topic, on that subject matter of Mahaprabhu's life and his spontaneous, meditations throughout his whole life on Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's glories and his pastime. Living right there in Sri Navadvip Dham, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj spoke this, and they compiled it together in this book, depicting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a golden volcano. Golden volcano. What does a volcano do?
It erupts.
It erupts. And what comes out of the volcano? We saw, what was that, a couple of years ago, when in Hawaii, the volcano erupted in the Big Island?
Lava.
And there was just like unending. Nobody knew when it was going to stop. There's just days and weeks of constant lava flow. So that reminded me, when that happened, it reminded me of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's depiction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a golden volcano erupting with all the transcendental ecstatic symptoms, flowing from him. So that poem that Srila Sridhar Maharaj wrote many years before, probably in the 1950s, perhaps, I'm not quite sure, but it was translated, Prema Dhamma Deva Stotram. But the Sanskrit is amazing. When you read it, it's a particular meter. And you know who loved to sing? He loved to sing many of the verses from that Prema Dhamma Deva Stotram. No. Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj. Yes. And I have recordings of him where he's singing various verses and shlokas. He used to stay up through the night singing different shlokas that he had memorized. Hundreds.
Babaji Maharaj?
Yes, Srila Akinchana Krishna Das Babaji Maharaj. Yeah, and he loved this composition of Srila Sridhar Maharaj so much. So Prema Dhamma Deva Stotram. What does that mean? A stotra is a collection of a lengthy composition of poetic prayers, stavas, stutis, lengthy composition, stotram. And Prema Dhamma Deva. Prema Dhamma Deva. What does that mean? Deva means the Lord. Supreme Lord. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the abode of Prem, Premadham. How is he the abode of Prem? Because he is Krishna combined with Srimati Radhika. And Srimati Radhika is the ashraya, the shelter of Prem, the abode of Prem. And now Krishna is trying to taste Srimati Radhika's Prem. So that's the title of his long composition, his stotra. Premadama Deva Stotra. So, and you know, reading Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Katha is a very unique experience because it was coming from him spontaneously in his latter years. So we had that experience reading Lord Nityananda Katha the other day from this book. Yeah. So but what I want to do is I want to warm up for that Katha and begin the 5th chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita of Lord Nityananda, because I was already reading through that. So, as I mentioned on Lord Nityananda's appearance day, that Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur, he's glorified Lord Nityananda so extensively in the 1st chapter of Chaitanya Bhagavat. And he's introducing the identity of Lord Nityananda, just as he is doing with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he has given various chapters throughout the work on Lord Nityananda and his pastimes also. And those are so delightful. We got to hear so much of that on his appearance day. I think the next day also. We were continuing with that topic. Yeah. But in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has always honored and paid his pranams to Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, right? So the pastimes that Vrindavan Das Thakur spoke or wrote, right, in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So, honoring that, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he told that he will only taste the remnants of what Vrindavan Das Thakur has left in the form of topics that he did not explain in length, right? So Vrindavan Das Thakur mostly told of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first 24 years in his household life in Navadvip Dham, all of those pastimes of Sankirtan and so forth, and all of his ecstatic manifestations in the early period. And his final, that was in his Adikanda and Madhyakanda. Those two sections of Chaitanya Bhagavat are long. But the last section, which is the Antyakanda, which is describing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Sannyas Leela, right? It's quite abbreviated, not discussed at length, although it's discussed. There's a number of chapters there. right? But especially Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was requested by all the devotees in Vrindavan who were still on the planet at that time after Mahaprabhu left to elucidate all of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's later pastimes in his final 24 years as a sannyasi. So that's the incredible work of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. I've mentioned this before, that Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, he glorified Chaitanya Charitamrita, saying that there is no other book which has seen the light of day that can compare with Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And we also have from Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Maharaj a very nice description of a pastime of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was speaking with a very scholarly Vaishnava personality who was very learned and renowned. And he was asking that personality, if you had to choose one book that you could have for the rest of your life, only one, which one would you choose? No. So he was telling that this scholar was, he first of all told Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And then that scholar began to quote various verses that glorify Srimad Bhagavad Gita from the Gita Mahatmya and so forth. Right? And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur prompted him a little further, And then that scholar thought, okay, Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he quoted many, many different verses glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, right? As the only book. But then Srila Prabhupada, he told, actually, I would choose Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then he began to explain why. How Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita really contains the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the books of the Goswamis, the most important literatures that have ever been produced. He wanted to have that. We've also heard from our Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, we've also heard that in his later years, talking about his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said, in his later final years, he only read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and just relishing that. Then, also our Srila Prabhupada wrote in his diary when he was crossing the Atlantic Ocean on the Jaladuta. And he wrote one entry there telling how he is feeling so far away from Sri Mayapur Dham, from the holy Dham, Vrindavan Dham. But in that being distant in that way, he says, I am relishing the nectar of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, in that way, I'm feeling that I want to start to read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita here and discuss the glories of Sri Nityananda Balaram, the 5th chapter of the Adi Lila. And I've mentioned this before that, the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita is the opening verses, which are called the Mangala Charana, right? Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has actually taken the shlokas that were written by Swarup Damodar Goswami. for his introductory, the first 14 shlokas of the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila. So, the first shloka he composed, Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan Isham Isha Vatarakan Tat Prakasham Tat Shaktir Krishna Chaitanya Sangyakam. That first verse about how Krishna manifests in 6 different features. Vande Gurun, first one, Guru. Isha Bhaktan, the devotees of the Lord, Isha Bhaktan, and the manifestations of the Lord as a devotee. Isha Bhaktan, Isham, the Lord himself. Isha Avatarakan, the Lord manifesting as an avatar. Tat Prakashamscha, and all of his manifestations, Prakash, manifestations. Tat Shakti, and his energies, Shakti. Krishna Chaitanya Sangyakam. All of these 6 features are Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. So, then the second verse, also composed by Krishnadas Kaviraj, Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Gaudodaye Pushpavanto Chitro Shamdo Tamonudo. So that second verse, which the first chapter is based upon, the first and the second verses, the first chapter of Adi Lila is based upon those 2 verses, which are composed by Krishnadas Kaviraj, right? And that shloka, Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito, is comparing Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu together. Nityananda Sahodito. They are both like the sun and the moon, but they have arisen simultaneously on the horizon of Gauda Desh. Chitro Shamdo Tamonudo. And by their manifesting in this way, in a very chitro, in a very wonderful way, they have blessed everyone. Shamdo means to give blessings and benedictions to everyone's heart. So Chitro Shamdo Tamonudo. And Tamonudo means, just as the sun when it rises, it dissipates all the darkness. Tama. So Tamonudo means that they dissipated the darkness in every living entity's heart. And in that first chapter of Adi Lila, then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is describing how these 2 lords, the Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, enabled the living entities to meet the 2 types of Bhagavats. Grantha Bhagavat, the book, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Bhakta Bhagavat, the person, the pure devotee. So, after that, then from the 3rd verse, then there's 4 shlokas that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is quoting from Swarup Damodar Goswami. And his next chapters, chapters 2, 3, 4, and 4, these 3 chapters, they're based upon those. Is it 3 or 4 shlokas? I'm forgetting now. Then, the 5th shloka, there's actually 5. From 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? So, up to the 9th shloka, from the 5th shloka, in this 5th chapter also, these 5 shlokas are quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami that were composed again by Swarup Damodar Goswami, telling the entire tattva. Who is Lord Nityananda? Who is he? What's his tattva? How he is actually Lord Balaram, manifesting in Gaur Lila. Yes. So then, the next shloka is regarding next two shlokas are regarding Sri Advaita Acharya, which on Advaita Acharya's appearance day, we heard those shlokas. So those two shlokas are about how Advaita Acharya's personality is Mahavishnu and Sadashiv. So that, then after that shloka, so that brings us up to, what was that? 10 and 11 shloka. And then comes Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam. Then the shloka also regarding the Panchatattva, who are these 5 personalities who appear with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So then in the Adi Leela, from chapters 7, 8, and 9, then it's discussing about how the Panchatattva danced and chanted in Navadvip Dham, and they broke open the storehouse of Krishna Prem, which was sealed. This is a figurative example being given that the Panchatattva, they danced and chanted in Navadvip with Mahaprabhu. And all of those personalities, they broke open the seal of this storehouse of Krishna Prem. And what did they do? Oh, they plundered and they began to eat. They began to eat and taste these transcendental delicacies of Krishna Prem. And as they danced and chanted more and more and more, they were devouring all this Krishna Prem. But they were also distributing it. And it's described that the more that they distributed, the more Krishna Prem came. It's unending. So this is the topics of the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then for the remaining chapters, there's also a description of the branches of the Chaitanya tree. And the Chaitanya tree is compared to like this huge trunk, which is Mahaprabhu. But then there are the branches, Nityananda branch, Advaita Acharya branch, and various others like this. And so many of the Vaishnavas' names are given there. A few hundred of the Vaishnavas' names are given there. And Krishnadas Kaviraj is saying that just by hearing their names, you become so fortunate to attain Krishna Prema. Then what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami does is he honors Vrindavan Das Thakur in the remaining chapters of Adi Leela, and he gives a synopsis of Mahaprabhu's chapters in household life, from his childhood, his youth, and like that, up to the point where he takes sannyas, right? So, it's so wonderful. Chaitanya Charitamrita, so full of nectar. And that's why in these initial chapters, he has gone into great depth in describing who these personalities are, who they really are. Because if you don't understand Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who is Mahaprabhu, what's his purpose for descending, and who is Lord Nityananda, who is Advaita Acharya, who is Gadadhar Pandit, who is Srivas Thakur, who are all the Vaishnavas, then if you don't understand, you can't completely enter into Gaur Leela. So, yeah. I remember years ago, I decided, okay, I'm just going to chant these verses every morning. All those verses, like the first 14 verses. And I also was chanting these 5 verses that are about Lord Nityananda that we're going to read in this chapter. And they stayed in my memory to some extent. You know, that was like back in the early 90s.
Those 5 verses are included in the 14, aren't they?
Yeah, right. So, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he gives there's a summary given here of this chapter, and I'm going to read that summary here. So this chapter is chiefly devoted to describing the essential nature and glories of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. Lord Sri Krishna is the absolute personality of Godhead, and his first expansion in a form for pastimes is Sri Balaram. So we discussed that on Nityananda Trayodasi Day, that Balaram is actually Krishna. It's his first expansion. He is his first expansion, Lord Balaram. Yes. And why? For the purpose of pastimes. Whenever Krishna expands, and his expansions expand, this is always for the purpose of pastimes, and executing all of these eternal, transcendental pastimes of love. So now, in this chapter, is describing that beyond the limitation of this material world is the spiritual sky. So here's our map. This is a map that the devotees can meditate upon. Map of the creation. Srila Prabhupada, you know, in the cover, the jacket cover of his first Srimad Bhagavatams, I don't know if you've ever seen a copy of his original first Srimad Bhagavatams. They've actually been, you know, again printed in their very original form. Not with the same exact paper that was there, you know, from India, but exactly the same book, with all the mistakes and this and that, you know, in the typesetting. So, what did Srila Prabhupada depict on the cover, on the jacket cover of his Srimad Bhagavatams?
The spiritual world.
Right. Can you describe how it looked on the book?
If I remember correctly, there were different planets with different manifestations of Vishnu, and
Yeah.
spread all over the cover.
Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada probably drew with his own hand some crude depiction for an Indian artist to paint, you know. And you've all seen, because the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust also redid that in a very, you know, more colorful way. The Srila Prabhupada's very simple in his cover. But what it is that, okay, you've got the cover of the book, right? You got the cover. And then you've got, in the top part, you've got the lotus flower-shaped planet of Goloka Vrindavan. Lotus flower-shaped planet. Okay. Yeah. So that lotus flower-shaped planet has so many petals, right? And in the middle of the lotus flower is the whorl, right? So there's a round part in the middle. And in there, on one side, is Radha and Krishna. You can see in the painting, Radha and Krishna are sitting. And some cows. Then on the other side, on the left side of that whorl, is a Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing. Then, extending out for the rest of the cover, are bright, shining, round-shaped objects which are indicating spiritual Vaikuntha planets. And on each one of those spiritual Vaikuntha planets, there's a form of Vishnu sitting with 4 arms, right? Then in the bottom left corner of the cover, of the rectangular cover, bottom left corner is a slightly darker blue area, just that bottom left corner. And there, Srila Prabhupada is depicting Mahavishnu lying in the causal ocean, and many universes coming from him, and then also depicting in one universe Garbhodakshai Vishnu with Lord Brahma coming from his navel and so forth. And then on the jacket cover, it also had writing indicating what's what. Like it had little numbers, number 1, number 2, like that. So here, Srila Prabhupada shows, it does go down. This is going down. It's not staying up.
Maybe just let it tighten.
Maybe it has to be tighter. Hare Krishna. Haribo. Yeah, so right from the first days that we came into the temple back in 1970, we were introduced to the map of the entire creation, which no one had any idea about in the whole world practically. But Srimad Bhagavatam is introducing this in unlimited detail. Unlimited detail. Whole process of creation, how the spiritual world is far beyond the material universes, how the Supreme Lord enters into the universes of the material creation, how the planetary systems in the spiritual world are eternal, how the planets are self-effulgent, there's no need for a sun or moon, you know, how Goloka Vrindavan is the topmost planet. And at the same time, Srila Prabhupada supplied to us the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in the form of what? Krishna books. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He supplied that for the whole world. He supplied that for the whole world. Krishna book. Have you read Krishna book? Yes. In Espanol. Oh. Very good. Did you have a chance yet, Risheshwari, to look at Krishna book?
I haven't. I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, I know. But that is so delightful. It's so beautiful how Prabhupada gave the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the whole life of Krishna, from his birth all the way. 90 chapters of the 10th canto. You have to begin to read that to really experience the joys of Krishna consciousness. Because in a very simple way, Srila Prabhupada presented for the very first time to the whole world the actual historical document of Srimad Bhagavatam describing Krishna's activities when he appeared here 5,000 years ago. This is the praman, this is the evidence, Srimad Bhagavatam. So when I came to the temple, that book was on one of those book holders, you know, those collapsible book holders from India, and it was sitting there. And I remember sitting there in the temple and turning the pages and seeing the pictures, first of all, because the artists worked very diligently to illustrate the Krishna book according to Srila Prabhupada's, you know, directions. And there's the whole story about George Harrison, from the Beatles, being approached by Shama Sundar to finance the printing of the book. At that time, it was going to be printed in Japan, right? And the printing cost was $19,000 US. $19,000. And Srila Prabhupada requested Shama Sundar to approach George about financing that. I mean, this is like the most epic printing of all time, you know. For the very first time, the people of this earth planet are going to get to actually hear and understand who is the supreme absolute truth, how he came down on this planet 5,000 years ago, how he performed so many sweet pastimes as a baby, and how he killed so many demons, and how he became a great king, and the whole history, for the very first time, being made available to the Western world by an authorized, you know, translator of it. So, Srila Prabhupada's, we even have his dictaphone recordings, his audio recordings, because this was not written by him. He was using a dictaphone for his, and he was reading Srimad Bhagavatam and then deciding how he will translate it. And it's unbelievable. I actually have it right here on this iPad. I have all of Prabhupada's recordings from the whole Krishna book series. They were kept by the BBT. And you can hear Prabhupada clicking on and off with his dictaphone. It's so wonderful, you know. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita goes into great depth in these first chapters about the universal creation and how Krishna, the Supreme Lord, expands himself. I remember coming from a Christian background, you know, Christian upbringing, going to a Christian school, learning the biblical teachings and so forth in my childhood and early teens, how, you know, there's a little bit of information in the very beginning, how God created the world in Genesis chapter, you know, but very brief, very brief. So when I came into the movement and I began to read and hear the explanation of how the creation takes place scientifically, how the elements, from the most subtle element of sound vibration, how all the elements, the 24 elements of the material universe gradually expand one after the other. And not only that, but how when the universe is destroyed, how it again goes back from the gross into this very subtle. And then how that enters into the body of the Supreme Lord until his next creation. So, God realization, it has to include this subject matter. How does God create? Of course, it's inconceivable. You know this word in Sanskrit for inconceivable? Achintya. Everyone say, achintya. Achintya means you cannot really think about it. It's beyond the thinking capacity of our brain. Okay? But it is absolute truth. And by performing the process of bhakti, then gradually this truth becomes realized and it enters into our intelligence. This absolute truth enters into our intelligence. And gradually it becomes not just gyan, but it becomes vigyan, not just knowledge, but realized knowledge. This is the process, by hearing from the authoritative source. Yes. So in the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, is describing that beyond the limitation of this material world. Do you ever wonder? Do you ever wonder what's beyond this material world that we're living in? We look up into the sky at night, we see all the planets, we see the sun, the moon. You ever wonder? Is this it? Is this all there is? And what's even there? No scientist can investigate and tell you. They have no idea. They have some telescopes and supposed means of going there by some kind of space vehicles, but actually they haven't gone. They have not gone. And so, but an inquisitive mind, it does always want to know. Srila Prabhupada says that. An inquisitive mind naturally wants to know what is there. We're here in this universe. How did we get here? How did the universe get here? Is there something beyond the universe? So that knowledge is available through the Vedic knowledge, through pure Vedic knowledge. So beyond the limitation of this material world, we're going to go till 8. That's in 15 more minutes. Is that okay? Yeah? Or is it too late? No. So beyond the limitation of this material world is the spiritual sky. Paravyom, it's called. Paravyom. Which has many spiritual planets, the supreme of which is called Krishna Loka. Krishna Loka, the abode of Krishna, has 3 divisions, which are known as Dwarka, Mathura, and Gokul. So that planet, Krishna Loka, also includes Mathura and Dwarka, and Krishna's form as Vasudeva Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan planet. Now, in that abode, the personality of Godhead, he expands himself into 4 plenary portions. What are they? Krishna, Balaram, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Those are the 4 that are there. Actually, Pradyumna is called the transcendental Cupid. So, Kamadev, Cupid, actually Pradyumna is that form. So these 4 are known as the original quadruple forms. Now when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to instruct Sanatana Goswami, later in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he devotes one entire chapter, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in describing these quadruple forms in Vaikuntha. And he specifically names the first 24 of them, of these quadruple forms. First 24. And how the 4 symbols of Vishnu, what are they? The club, that's the mace, and the Sudarshan chakra, and the conch shell, and the lotus flower. So in these first original 24 forms, the symbols are situated differently in the 4 hands of Vishnu. And he describes exactly, in such and such a form, the lotus flower is situated on his bottom left hand, then the conch is on his upper left hand, like that, in a clockwise way, he's describing. So if Mahaprabhu is going to devote that much time to describing these transcendental forms of the quadruple forms of Vishnu, it's an important topic if Mahaprabhu is going to tell this. So
I used to wonder why is so much time spent explaining these things.
Mhm.
I have to admit that.
Yeah, I also. But it's necessary for understanding the way by which the unlimited incarnations and expansions of the Lord take place. Because we have no idea how vast is the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada told that one Vaikuntha planet is bigger than our entire universe. And on that, every single Vaikuntha planet, there's a particular form of Vishnu, of Lord Narayan, and there's unlimited. We always, Vaikuntha, the word Vaikuntha also means without limit. Because like the material universe that we are situated in, it is not unlimited. It is a finite amount of space. A specific amount of space. And that's told in the Srimad Bhagavatam how many millions of miles.
40
The
billion.
diameter, billions, yes,
40
the
billion.
diameter of the universe and so forth. You see? But the Vaikuntha planets, they're bigger than our universe, and there's unlimited numbers of them. So what we have to begin to understand when we try to approach the subject matter of God, just God, okay? The Supreme Being, who's created everything. We have to understand one thing. Number one, He is Ananta. Ananta means without limit. There is no limit. He's Ananta. And He is also an ocean of rasa. He's full of rasa. And His energies are unlimited. There's no limitation at all. I had to get my mind around this thing, this conception, when I came. I didn't have a very hard time doing it. But in order to comprehend and to begin to approach the supreme truth, you have to accept that He is completely achintya. He is beyond human imagination. But He nevertheless manifests His eternal, inconceivable, transcendental form and unlimited forms according to His sweet will. And He executes unlimited pastimes according to His desire. See? So everything is going on by His will. And He is simply playing. This is not some kind of fanciful fairy tale, information that there's this person who's bluish, plays a flute and dances with gopis and tends to the cow. No, this is the absolute truth. He has His greatest planet in the entire creation, and that's what He's doing. He's continually there. The Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma. Prabhupada introduced that right in the very beginning. How Lord Brahma envisioned that spiritual world, that planet of Krishna. And he described it in the Brahma Samhita. What is that? Chintamani prakarasadmasu kalpa briksha lakshavriteshu surabhira vipalayantam lakshmi sahasrasata sambrama sevyamanam govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. Govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. Lord Brahma's verse after verse after verse. He's glorifying Krishna, who is Govinda. And He is the Adi Purusham. What does Adi Purusham mean?
Original person.
Yes, He is the Adi, the origin, the original, the first person, Purusha. All persons come from Him. He is the Adi. No one else is the Adi, only Him. Tamaham bhajami, I'm worshipping him. Bhajami. You see? So, this is a necessary topic for the devotees to hear and to assimilate. So, in the Krishna Loka, in that planet, is a transcendental place known as Shvetadvip. Remember that song of Mangalananda's? Yeah, he wrote one song. I forget the melody of it. Talking about this. So in the Krishna Loka planet is a transcendental place known as Shvetadvip or Vrindavan. It is described in this chapter how that place has different names for the same place. One of them is Gokul, one is called Vrindavan, one is called Shvetadvip. But this, Krishna Loka, has in the whorl of the planet. That is the Shvetadvip. Now, below Krishna Loka, in the spiritual sky, are the Vaikuntha planets. And on each Vaikuntha planet, a four-handed Narayan expanded from the first quadruple manifestation is present. On each and every planet, there is a four-handed Narayan form which is expanded from the first four Narayan forms, quadruples. Is expanded from that. And he's present on each and every Vaikuntha planet. The personality of Godhead, known as Sri Balaram in Krishna Loka, is the original Sankarshan. Sankarshan means who attracts, the attracting deity. So he's the original Sankarshan. And he is called Maha Sankarshan. That original form of Balaram is also called Maha Sankarshan in his forearm form. And this is why in Dwarka, in Krishna's manifestation here in this world, sometimes Krishna was showing his forearms because he's Vasudev Krishna. So he can show either 2 or 4 arms. And the same with Balaram. Balaram is the original form in Goloka Vrindavan with 2 arms, but his first expansion is Sankarshan, Maha Sankarshan. So,
what's the difference between Maha Sankarshan and Mula Sankarshan?
There is a difference because there's 2 groups of quadruple forms that maybe it will be told here in this chapter. Now, the personality of Godhead, yes, known as Sri Balaram in Krishna Loka, is the original Sankarshan, the attracting deity. And from this Sankarshan expands another Sankarshan called Maha Sankarshan. So that original one is the Mul Sankarshan. And then from that Mul Sankarshan comes Maha Sankarshan, who resides in one of the Vaikuntha planets. And by his internal potency, Maha Sankarshan maintains the transcendental existence of all the planets in the spiritual sky, where all the living beings are eternally liberated souls. The influence of the material energy is conspicuous there by its absence. And on those planets, the second quadruple manifestation is present. So there's the original, the Mul, quadruple expansion, and then there's the second one, expanded from there.
What are their different functions in Maharaj?
We won't go into that right now. Let's just cover this. So outside of the Vaikuntha planets, now we have to envision, outside of the Vaikuntha planets, is the impersonal manifestation of Sri Krishna, which is known as Brahma Loka. This is where the people who like to talk about merging and everything is one, they will attain there, the impersonal manifestation of Krishna. That's outside of the Vaikuntha planets, not in the region of the Vaikuntha planets. And on the other side of that Brahmaloka is the spiritual Karana Samudra. The Karana Samudra, it means causal ocean. So there's an ocean there, and it's called Karana Samudra, which means causal. Karana means causal. It is the very first causation, right? So the material energy exists on the other side of the causal ocean. That's where we are. Without touching it. Oh, the causal ocean is spiritual. It doesn't even touch the material energy. But the material energy is on the other side of that. So first there's Vaikuntha, then Brahmaloka, then Karana Samudra, and then the material energy. So in the causal ocean, in that ocean is Mahavishnu, the original Purusha expansion from Sankarshan. Mahavishnu places his glance over the material energy, and by a reflection of his transcendental body, he amalgamates himself within the material elements. So he's not touched by the material elements. It's a reflection. That's why we heard Gurudev talking about Lord Shiva so many times, that he comes from a, how did he put it? Dim twilight reflection of Mahavishnu's glance. A dim twilight reflection. Lord Shiva. So, and here it's saying that placing his glance over the material energy, and by a reflection of his transcendental body, so there's the glance and also the reflection of his body, he amalgamates himself within the material elements. That's how earth, water, fire, air, everything comes. Now, as the source of the material elements, the material energy is known as Pradhan. This is the name of the source of all the material elements before they've manifested. When they're in their unmanifested state, that material energy is called Pradhan. And as the source of the manifestations of the material energy, it is known as Maya. So that Pradhan, that original material energy, is called Maya. But material nature is inert. Material nature is inert in that she has no independent power to do anything. You know? Can the earth, the water, can it move? No, it has no independent power to do anything. Therefore, so she, the material energy, is feminine. She is empowered to make the cosmic manifestation. How? How does she get empowered? By the glance of Mahavishnu. By the glance of Mahavishnu. Maya, the Pradhan, the original material energy, is now, by the glance of Mahavishnu, she is now empowered to make the cosmic manifestation. And therefore, the material energy is not the original cause of the material manifestation. This is where the scientists have it completely wrong. Because the atheistic Darwinian theory of evolution, the Big Bang theory, or whatever you want to call it, it's trying to propose that the material energy acts itself independently. No. It has no ability whatsoever without the glance of Mahavishnu. So rather, so therefore the material energy is not the original cause of the material manifestation. Rather, the transcendental glance of Mahavishnu over material nature produces that cosmic manifestation. Very important to understand. So Purusha and Prakriti, everything comes from these two, masculine, Purusha, and feminine, Prakriti. Everything happens in the entire creation. But first is the masculine, just as we see even in the birth process of human beings. The male injects something, and then the female is able to start producing. You see? But without that, it cannot take place whatsoever. Never, ever, ever in the whole history of the material universe has there ever been without that combination in any species of life. You see? So it comes originally from the Supreme Purusha, the Supreme Male Personality of Godhead, and his Shakti. But the Shakti depends upon Shaktiman. And therefore, the Maya Shakti in the material world requires the glance of Mahavishnu, the impregnation of Mahavishnu. This is all vividly described also in Brahma Samhita and in various chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, ending our class tonight, this is really good that we started to read this introduction. Didn't want to skip over it. So after that takes place, Mahavishnu again enters every universe. He expands and enters into each and every universe as the reservoir of all living entities. Because where are the living entities going to come from? They're eternal. They're not created. And they're in the body of Mahavishnu, all of us. So that Mahavishnu, when he enters into the universe, is called Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And that is the source of all the living entities. And from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu expands the Kiradakshaya Vishnu, the super soul of every living entity. And Garbhodakshaya Vishnu also has his own Vaikuntha planet in every universe, where he lives as the super soul or the supreme controller of the universe. So there's a Vaikuntha planet in every universe, and that's where Garbhodakshaya Vishnu lives. He doesn't live in matter in the material world. Now, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu reclines in the midst of the watery portion of the universe, and he generates the first living creature of the universe, Brahma. And the imaginary universal form is a partial manifestation of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So the Virata Rupa is a partial, and it's also an imaginary form, but it exists. It's a partial manifestation of that Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Like when Krishna showed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, right? Arjuna wanted to see, and he requested Krishna, please show me your universal form. And then Krishna showed. He showed him the entire universe in this form, right in front of his eyes. This is the proof in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Who else can do that? Anybody can say, I'm God. Can you show your universal form? No. You see? So...
Well, I just don't feel like it.
What?
I said, well, I just don't feel like it.
Right. So anyway, we'll stop there. We'll continue tomorrow. We'll just finish. I don't want to push it farther and farther because I gave a promise. But we'll stop at 8. So, now I'm getting inspired. Now I'm sure that this is the topic. This is the right topic to choose for these next days. Of course, it'll be interspersed with Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj. But this will be the topic for the coming week or so. We should be able to finish this in maybe 1 week.
This is all talking from the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yeah, this is the introduction to the 5th chapter. And the 5th chapter is titled The Glories of Lord Nityananda Balaram. So when we finish this, we're really going to have a very clear understanding of this tattva. So tattva is also relishable, you know. It's very, very relishable. Tattva Siddhanta. So I've been wanting to do this, so Krishna's arranged. There's now a time and a place and an audience.
Thank God.
Yeah. Okay, Gaur Premanandi. Jai Shri Lord Nityananda Balarama ki Jai. Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Gaur, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Gaur, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Gaur, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Gaur, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Gaur, Jaya Nitai, Jaya Gaur, Jaya Gurudeva, 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 Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari, Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Jiyo ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Govinda ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Om Vrindai Tulsi Devyai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prane Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. All glory to the assembled devotees.